what were you thinking of talking about?
I was not convinced by the idea of global citizenship. I don't know if you were. Like, I want to talk about what kind of attracted you to the idea and what didn't.
My question for you then would be, how would you define it further? Because you were saying before that, you know, it's something we have to be so careful about.
Yes.
Which is maybe one of the reasons that I sort of see it the way I do, that the extent of the ideology is that when we make decisions, or at least when we look at the decisions being made by companies or governments or whatever, that we're considering the context. We're not making a judgment call on how that context is applied. We're aware of it and we're making our decisions in light of it. Mm-hmm. And that is the extent of the ideology. I don't think it necessarily has to say what an outcome is, because stuff is contextual. What works in sub-Saharan Africa versus what works in Argentina versus what works in Winnipeg versus Brandon.
And that's why development is
very
failed,
different.
Right?
Yeah,
Part of it, yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So how would you further define it than that? Like
the concept of global citizenship?
Yeah.
It would be partially the idea that it's about, to me, international solidarity. I mean, that's another big word, right? But like solidarity in terms of like being caring and nurturing and helping people, but not overbearing, right?
Okay.
Like also setting limits to that, because you're stepping on sovereignty, because you're stepping on, because that responsibility, in a way, that global citizenship steps on boundaries.
Right.
It's kind of like the right to protect.
Mm-hmm. Every time we claim a freedom, we claim somebody else's freedom.
Yes. So we are limiting our own sovereignty, understanding that, being aware of that, but also understanding that by declaring global citizenship, you're limiting someone else's sovereignty, because you're saying they're born into it. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I'm limiting it because you're born. And
you're saying that person has certain responsibilities that they have to live up to now.
Yeah,
whether
but
they chose
I also
to accept
feel
them or
like
not.
in a way, this concept of global citizenship, it needs to be equal, because what if that person doesn't want you to step into their sovereignty and say, I'm a global citizen. We're all born in the same globe, but I don't want you stepping. I can step on yours, but you can't step on mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about that? What about the concept of unequal power? I mean, what would you do then? And that's where it gets murky.
Yeah, big time. Like you're sort of seeing it on sort of but sort of an organizational level, sort of in terms of countries or groups or cultures.
Because I feel like it would be that.
Right.
Like, I mean, we could talk about a civil society movement as well,
right.
which I think it's more what you're saying. But I think that the civil society is encouraging the effects on the government and so on and so forth.
Somewhat, yeah. But I think more what I'm getting at is that I'm identifying the term on an individual level. Well, maybe I'm not, but I'm asking you, I guess. Would you also see a definition or of an application of it on an individual personal level as well as on sort of a societal level?
Well, yeah. I mean, the whole concept of fair trade, of the decisions you make in your everyday life, being internalizing the externalities, right? Being inquisitive about where things come from. And that is something that's natural to humans. Your choice would be not to define it?
Would be to say this is a framework in which we think. This is a starting point, and it's an awareness of the interconnectedness of the world. As much as we need to think in context and sort of hold in our mind the awareness of interconnectedness, I think there's always a danger. I think you've been saying this a little bit too, that there's a real danger, especially maybe not so much for us in the so-called developed or first world, but in places that maybe don't have the same amount of freedom to determine their own destiny for various reasons, that when we start talking about this global level, the loudest voice wins out and the biggest
That's
pocketbook wins out.
exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but like I
Yeah.
should have maybe been more clear. But like that's exactly
Yeah,
what
I
I'm
totally
saying.
disagree with that.
No!
I'm kidding.
But like I do understand the importance of flexibility, because then you can't, if you're too closed-minded, then you can't include culture, and you can't include everyone.
That's right.
So flexibility, of course, you need to apply it. I mean, you need to have that flexibility and that just common understanding, but at the same time, control its purpose.
Yeah.